I'm Don Tess, better known as the Dawn of Beer.
And I'm M. Sutter, better known as Pints and Panels.
Welcome to the 17th episode of the All About Beer podcast. Every 2 weeks, we talk with leading experts and take a deep dive into one topic in beer. Visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. Or visit our Patreon, visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/allaboutbeer to support this show and others. This week on the show, we're going to talk about Southern Hemisphere hops. Em, what is your favorite hop from the Southern Hemisphere?
Oh man, I got to give it up to my pal, Nelson Sauvin. I had Nelson Sauvin for the first time in 2011 when I was living in Oregon, and I was such a fan. I love it together with something, actually, usually not particularly on its own, but man, when it like acts as kind of the secondary hop to another hop, it's a real stunner. What about you?
I don't know that I have a favorite. I will say that there is something special about New Zealand hops. Like, I can't think of one that I don't like, for example.
Yeah.
So, basically anytime I'm at a brewery and I see, this beer is made with X from New Zealand, I'm all over it. So,
yeah, it's so unique, really
exactly.
unique. And I'm really excited to talk to our two guests about what makes those hops unique.
Exactly. Yeah. We're on the same page.
I
know. We'll introduce our guests and get into a conversation. But first, if you would like to help support the All About Beer podcast, please reach out to podcast@allaboutbeer.com.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
Estrella Galicia is an independent family-owned brewery in northwest Spain, founded in 1906. Estrella Galicia Cerveza Especial is a world-class lager brewed using the finest Spanish malts, locally cultivated Galician hops, and the best brewing practices made out of the state-of-the-art facility in A Coruña. Recognized around the world for quality and exceptional character, Estrella Galicia is a beer like no other. To learn more about Estrella Galicia, follow them at Estrella Galicia USA on Instagram.
Brent McGlashen is a fifth-generation hop farmer from Motueka, New Zealand. The McGlashen family is one of the original families left in hop farming in New Zealand and have been growing hops since 1900. They've been part of all cycles of the hop roller coaster, but have remained at the forefront of innovation and sustainability inside this small niche industry. Mac Hops is now the family-branded farming name, and it includes 2 farm locations. The home farm, which is 30 hectares and located right in the heart of Motueka, and their new farm formed in 2017 in the Moutier Valley, which is 85 hectares of hops and 50 hectares of dryland farming. Mac Hops has been supplying both local and international brewers with their high-quality hops for over a century and are proud to have made many friends along the way. For the benefit of our American listeners, 30 hectares is about 74 acres and 85 hectares is about 210 acres. That is a lot of hops. Welcome to the show, Brent.
Oh, thanks for the invite, Don.
And thank you for getting up early for us because it's 7 o'clock in the morning where you are.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it's not too bad. That's now we've finished harvest. It's actually dark at the moment, so but before we were starting harvest, it would be nice and light from sort of 6:15 onwards for the tractors to start. But now as winter's on its way, as autumn's rolling on in, we've had some very cold mornings in the last week, and she's certainly getting darker, that's for sure.
and of course, it's 7 o'clock in the morning tomorrow relative to us. So you are speaking to us from the future. So we will ask you. I
love
that.
That always makes me always so happy when I talk to someone from New Zealand or Australia. I love that.
Are you sure you're not jealous, Em? Because you'll never catch us in this world. You never will.
So first off, in your introduction, we mentioned that your 2 farms total 115 hectares of hops. Is there an easy way to explain how much that is in terms of either how much beer that might result in or how many kilograms of actual hops?
Oh gosh, that's over 200 ton we normally produce off that area, about 240, 250 ton of hops. So it's a few piles of hops that makes a good deal of beer. So
it's a lot. Is that fair
to say?
That's
a lot.
And and it depends how much our craft brewing friends want to pump up the barrel content of ours. So
Of course.
yeah, but they can keep pumping it up more if they like. That's fine.
There's some American breweries that would use all 240 tons in one beer.
Yeah, and I think you'd probably be able to lick our belts on our machine and get a similar taste, I would have thought.
So what makes Southern Hemisphere hops so special?
Great question, Don. Look, we do have a unique thing going on down here. That's, the environment has, I believe, a huge impact in where we're growing. If you look at the latitude that we're growing on, I think we're about 42 or 45 degrees, and where it's grown everywhere else in the world, we've always had people question, how can you grow such good hops, at a latitude like that? But, as climates are changing and all that's sort of shifting with the weather patterns, no, we're finding a huge success with our hops. And, we're less than, I think we're just less than 1% of the world production down here. So we have to create those hops that are different. We can't just be creating a standard run-of-the-mill hop variety that brewers know that they can get from anywhere else. It has to be different. So
What are you growing? Like, what does your hop farm, like, are you doing you have all sorts, or are you focusing on one? What's the...
There's about 20 commercial varieties here in New Zealand, Tim, so there's quite a number. We would be growing about 15 of those commercial varieties, plus we do all the trialling for New Zealand hops and for plant and food. So we have all the trial hops on our farm, and which is real fun because I get to give them a real good beating around and see, a real good test in the commercial sense, and we can really put them through their paces and see if they're going to be a success for the future. So yeah, we're growing all sorts from Motueka to Nelson Sauvin to Riwaka to Waka 2, Waimea, Rakau. There's all of the names that we hope people know and I hope people are using. So
yeah. And you kind of mentioned the special location. Do you find consistent differences between your two farms?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, Don, because that's the reason of our two farms. So our home farm is situated right on the outskirts of our little town called Motueka. So we're just to the back of the township, and we have the sea is about 2 kilometres, or let's say 1.5 miles away from us. The mountains are about 3 or 4 miles behind us. The river, the Motueka River, flows just over our back fence. So yeah, it's a beautiful setting. We have a very sandy silt loam on our farm as a soil type, so very good drainage, and can grow some wonderful hops. Particularly, we find the aroma hops grow very, very well down here and on these soils. Then we have our Motueka farm that's sort of 15-minute drive from where we are, and it's in clay country. We've got some of the heaviest clay soils, if not the heaviest clayed soils in New Zealand hop farming at the moment, and we specifically chose that site for the soil type that we can grow on.
And what will that clay do differently?
So with the clay generally can hold the alpha varieties, the heavier varieties, better, and it means that we've got the best of both worlds. We can position those varieties that grow better on one soil type and put them in that soil type, and the ones that grow better on the other, they go up to the other farm. So to give you an idea as well, for water availability for our irrigation, we're using all overhead irrigation, which we're very lucky we're able to. With we don't have the disease pressures as the rest of the world does. We have in Motueka, our water is 18 feet deep, and we're in probably one of the best aquifers in New Zealand. The water just keeps on flowing underneath our feet. It's amazing. With some of the clearest water in New Zealand. And then up at our Motueka farm, with all the water trying to make it through the clays, we have an irrigation well that goes down 1,200 feet to pick up that water. So that's sort of giving a few people on the other side of the world a bit of a headache. It's a long way down. So,
Oh, wow.
and we also supplement that water up the Moot Tree farm. We have some hills that collect rain for us over winter and in the big rainfalls, and we use a majority of that water as well too. So, getting a natural catchment of water. So, yeah, we find that the balance between the both farms and the different soil types, we're able to create sort of a well-rounded world-class hop. So yeah, we're quite excited to have the opportunity, but it was a calculated excitement, let's say that.
It was purposeful what you did.
Yeah.
You're sort of touching on a bunch of questions I already wanted to ask. So
I know Don is ecstatic right now to talk to you, Brent, because he's such a nerd and he's going to bring the nerdy questions. So I hope you're ready.
Well, and you sort of touched on some of this, but like, are there unique challenges to growing hops in New Zealand? Like, as I understand it, they have to be organic.
Yeah, they don't have to be organic, but we grow them sort of in an organic way. The only thing that we don't do organic is we don't have we still use commercial sprays in terms of the weed sprays, but we also use commercial fertilizer.
Oh, I think we've lost Brent.
The growers.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, sorry.
You cut out for a second.
Yeah, I was just saying that we don't have any sort of sprays that have to go up into the canopy of our hops. So we're only really using about 3 weed sprays a year, and then we also use sheep to control our weeds. So that's another form of sort of environmental goodness that we don't have to keep on spraying. So yeah, we like to. It's basically a spray-free crop in terms of nothing goes into the canopy and nothing touches the hops. We don't have any mildews, no problems there. And I just hope we don't get that problem, because New Zealand has a perfect environment for growing mildews. So yeah, it's also gives us the ability to use our overhead sprinklers. And with our overhead sprinklers, we can create a different environment for our hops, and we can also grow some very good cover crops underneath as our hops are still growing, which provides a lot of life to the soil and like ground cover. And yeah, it's just something we really thrive on in how we grow things.
Yeah, so, and the sheep are happy too.
And the sheep are very happy. Yeah. So, and do they taste like beer? No, they don't taste like beer.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, so typically the sheep will get in after hop training. Once the hops have wound their way up close to the top, then we can send some sheep in, and they do a lot of the leaf plucking and defoliation and sucker control down below for us. So they're probably our cheapest employees we'll ever employ. So they do a great job. They replace what they put in by putting it back through the system. And
that is the politest way I've ever heard that. But yes, thank you for that.
Yeah, I was trying to be diplomatic. Yeah, so and people got to realise in a dung loading of sheep, there's about 700 kilograms of nitrogen loading on that area per hectare. So it's quite significant how it processes it through their body and then out through the system, and it is quite a fertilizer. So yeah, and look, I'd love to see sheep used more in world hops. It's a great management tool. If it can avoid putting some more sprays on the ground, I think it's beneficial for our hop farmers. And I know in the States that the USDA, I think, has a clause in there that you're not allowed to use any sort of livestock into a crop production, I think 90 days before harvest. Well, hell, the hops have only just gotten out of the ground 90 days before harvest. So, yeah, it's a real shame. And I hope that can be reversed at some stage, or people can get into using some of these other tools of the trade that can be more environmentally friendly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So hops grow that quickly. So popping out of the ground to finish is 3. I mean, that's how many, I guess, how many centimeters or inches? I'm thinking inches because I'm an American. for a day is that? I mean, that's
This-
because how tall are your trellises?
Yeah, good question, Em. So our trellises are generally probably the more smaller. We're not dwarf size, of course, but we're the more smaller hop structures in the world. We're growing on about 15 to 16 feet of trellis. So I think it's more likely 17 to 18 in America and even more in Germany. So it's a smaller trellis, but we grow our hops closer together. And I think what's 2.7 meters in feet. I'm not too sure, but we're about 2 to 3 feet closer how we grow our structure. So when you've got a hop field, if you go shorter, you can go closer. If you go taller, you need to go wider. And it's all about light utilization. And as that light gets down into the bulk of the hop vine, that's when it needs to be hitting the hop cones, and those hop cones need to be getting energized and charged up. There's a lot of complex things going on in a hop cone when it's growing. But to give you an idea of timing, our hops come out of the ground sort of around September time. We'll be hop training middle to the end of October, right through to early December. And from then on, they're racing their way up the strings. We don't want them to be growing too fast because, of course, each day and each growth spacing is where a branch site can be. So we call that internode spacing. And if your internode spacing is too large, meaning things have grown far too quick, everyone can post photos on social media. Oh, look at this. This is amazing. I'm the first to the top. It's not always the best way to be. So we're wanting that internode spacing to be quite nicely compact, meaning that the plant's gotten out of the ground nicely and it's slowed down in its growth pattern. As it's slowed in its growth pattern, then it puts out more branching sites. And then once the hop gets to the top of the wire, it bends over and it shuts off its sap flow. And then that sap flow it says to the plant, righto guys, I can't grow up, so I need to grow out. And that's when the branches form. As the branches come out, that's where you'll start forming your hop cones on the branches. You'll never form a hop cone on the main vine itself.
Oh, interesting.
So ultimately, there used to be certain measurements of how good your crop was going to be. You could count, a minimum would be say 22 branch spacing by the time it got to the top, but then it changed to 25, then to 27. But ultimately you just have to run with what Mother Nature gives you at the time. Say for instance, the season that we've just had, the Riwaka variety is a very, very hard variety to grow, and it's she's a temperamental little lady, so you've got to help her along as best you can. But if the environment isn't doing that for you, we had, after about the second week of hop training, we would normally go back through a second time to redo the plants that were missed. And this year we had to put it off another week because we had a cold spell come through and also very dull weather. So the plant wasn't overly energized. It was happy just sitting doing what it's doing, but therefore it stagnated in growth. And a week like that at a critical time in its growth can really hold the plant back right the way through to the very end. So it just it affects yields, all sorts of things. So
I think that a lot of people think of farming as, you plant it and then you sit back and wait. But I mean, you're doing something every day.
Yeah, and hops, basically, if you're out there in the field and you see something, you've missed it by several days. So you have to preempt what's going on. If you want to be a top-end producer, it's a phenomenal plant, the hop vine. It grows so fast, it can grow up to a foot a day. If you want to sit there with your deck chair and a can of beer to pass the day away, it's one plant you could actually watch grow. It really is a unique plant with how it can wind its way up the string. It needs to be helped along the way. You need to be giving your soils a balanced feed of plant feeding nutrients as well as soil feeding nutrients, because if your soil has got no basically money in the bank, then it's got no way of withdrawing that money. There's no loans or mortgages you can take out on the soil. If it's not there, you can't grab it. So And these plants, when they're growing so fast up, plants, people got to remember, when you're a plant, you're feeding by your root hairs. So it's the microscopic little wee hairs that are growing, not the big fatties that are your storage roots. So if you were to grab your hand and sort of clasp it and face it down, you'd get an idea of what a hop plant grows like. So it's got significant storage roots that at the moment now, post-harvest, is locking as much nutrients as it can in before winter, and it's trying to store those nutrients away. So they're the storage roots. In springtime, those roots will help energize the plant and bring the plant out of its hibernation. And what you're wanting over winter time, we are wanting a cool winter. If we don't get that cool winter, it's basically it's like a fuel tank. If you've got a warm winter, part of that fuel tank is going to get used up, and therefore you need to that you're going to have to replace more in the background. If you've got a good winter and it shut everything down, then you're going to get a good flush and a good consistent growth come through. So yeah, we've got to watch all seasons, not only when the hops are growing up the string, but also when they're down hibernating in the ground. We keep an eye on the winter soil temperatures and everything like that.
Yeah, year round, you're monitoring things.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And of course, you can't rotate crops when you're growing hops.
No. Once it's in the ground, she's in there for its lifetime, and its lifetime's either determined by crop production or else by markets. So right. We've got some varieties in there that are over 25 years old and still growing very well. Sort of for a hop life cycle. Well, for me personally, I grow a first year crop, our baby crop. I get disappointed if I don't get close to a full crop. If we plant it at the right time and the weather gods are shining on us, we can actually produce a very significant crop out of its first year. And then the second and third years, of course, as I've set some new roots down, they're producing very nice crops as well. And once you get to, say, year 5 or 6, things will sort of plateau and button off, and you get a sort of consistent crop from then in to, say, year 15, and then you might drop off another sort of 10 to 15% from then on in as the plant gets older.
Right. You mentioned some of your vines are 25 years old. Can you and of course you've been in the industry forever, so can you talk about how New Zealand hops and what the market wants has changed over the years? I think that currently everybody loves the super tropical gooseberry, thiol type flavors, but 25 years ago that wouldn't have been the case.
Yeah, great question, Don, because that's what people have asked. How do we predict hop movements and what beer styles are in? It's a complete gamble. When 27 years ago now, I think Nelson Sauvin was released, and when it was first released, we were in the commodity hop cycle. So if you weren't growing a certain amount of hops per hectare or per acre, you simply weren't a viable business. So that was when the hop industry lost, about 100,000 acres around the world in 10 years, because some of those farmers with some of their old plantings and things, and it was a pretty tough time for growers, a very tough time. As families, when I was growing up, there wasn't much hope for the hop industry, to be honest. I remember when Dad had a few of the board meetings and stuff at home, they were mentioning all this stuff about, they're saying in the world media that hops are going to be replaced by a synthesized oil that's going to do everything in beer, and hop farmers will soon be no longer. All this sort of stuff. And you're at a time when you're kind of at your lowest anyway. We only had a handful of brewers around the world who were buying, all the hops around the world. And we all of us worldwide rode on the back of how the crop grew for everyone else. So New Zealand at the time had to put a stake in the sand and go, actually, we've got something here that's a difference. So out came Nelson Sauvin, which was the most out there flavour, taste, everything that you could ever imagine. It was so polarising. And we had many brewers of the time, who would turn up and just turn their noses up and say, well, how are we going to use this stuff? It just smells like someone's gone and a cat's gone and peed all over it. So in terms of aroma, we're like, well, this is going to fall flat on its nose, isn't it? But yeah, then we had a brewery here in New Zealand. I think it was Lion Brewery at the time. They tried it in their trial plant, and they really enjoyed it because it had a difference, and that was something they could market on as a difference. And therefore, Nelson Sauvin started its life cycle. But Nelson Sauvin is case in point for how it really made hop growers struggle early on, because it didn't yield anywhere near like the commodity hops, and we needed to command a better price if it was going to be viable to grow. So reluctantly, the money slowly started coming out of the breweries' purses, but then once people got onto it, they wanted to jump all on it because they knew that there was nothing else like it in world hops. So from then on, the breeders that we have here at Plant and Food, they've been part of New Zealand Hops, the cooperative, for decades. They realised, yep, look, we've got a great range of varieties here that are different and we believe can make an impact in the world. And they certainly have done all of that. So yeah, now we're at the point of we have a very, very advanced breeding program, and it's often been held on a pedestal around the world in terms of world hop breeding. Dr. Ron Beatson, he's been breeding hops for 40 years. He's just retired. He's been part of Plant and Food for 50 years, started off in tobacco and then joined into hops 10 years later. So he learned off one of the best, which was Dr. Rudy Roborg, who was the first person to breed out Phytophthora root rot back in the day, which was very, very important. Back then, back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, hop growers here in New Zealand were replacing their plants up to every 3 years. By the time you got to the third year, a lot of the field had rotted out. So that was a very, very important, I wouldn't say find, I'd say, he was the one who bred it out of the system. So Dr. Ron Beatson obviously learnt from him, and then he started bringing some of his own difference to the program, and now we have Kerry Templeton, who is now running the breeding program, and Kerry's fantastic as well too, and he's got more of the brewing side as well. There's a little wee micro brew kit out there that they're brewing about 12 to 15 different single hill plot trials every week that we're out there sampling, and it basically becomes the Olympics. You start off in the preliminaries, and then you go to the quarterfinals, then the semi-finals, and then when you hit the finals, you know that you've got a really, really good hop. So yeah, it's our breeding program is something we're very, very proud of, and it's something that we've just recently, in the last couple of weeks, we've had brewers from all over the world come, and they've been lucky enough to be allowed in to see what goes on behind the scenes, and they're just absolutely amazed, and they've been able to rub some of these new varieties that are coming along, and the reaction is really quite special, and you're onto a good thing, and you're onto something that people are going to enjoy. So we're excited to see where the future keeps on going, but we also have a great shopping basket of spices in our background at the moment too.
That's awesome. Could you describe for beer drinkers, what should they be looking for from a New Zealand hop, i.e. kind of what makes New Zealand hop special? And then you kind of hinted towards new varieties. So can you, again, you're speaking from the future, so can you
it's true, Don.
can you tell us what variety, can you name a couple of varieties that beer drinkers maybe should be looking for in the next year or two?
Yeah, sure. So typically I explain, I've spent 4 harvests over in America, and spent a lot of time there. I've got some really awesome friends over there that are part of the hop industry. And I noticed quite a difference between our hops. So what I find in the beer itself, when you've got a New Zealand hop variety, you typically have a forward palate tasting hop. It's very crisp on the front of your mouth. There's not a great deal of linger in behind the back of your throat or anything like that. whereas sort of more the American varieties would be classic of that. They hit the front, but then they go towards the back. New Zealand hops are very, very zappy right at the front, and it gives you a very crisp, sharp initial taste right off the go. New varieties that, I think you've said before, Don, the varieties in the southern hemisphere have been classical of their tropical fruits and their taste profiles like that. And yes, we do have that in quite the mouthful, but we're also not shy to say, look, we are a variety that we're happy to be mixed in with other hops from around the world, because if we're providing that front of mouth feel, and you've got and you're a brewer who's got some other hops from around the world going and providing that back, well, then the consumer is getting the full mouthful. They're getting the whole fruit bowl all in one. So we've never been shy to say, we're not out there saying, oh, you must only use New Zealand hops in this brew. No, we actually believe, if you're going to be in the sandpit, you share the toys with your friends. So it's a very kind of a unique flavour that we can get out, and we can get it out at the front of the beer in terms of your mouth profile. There's quite a few differences. We have, in our environment, we have a lot of moisture here. Just to give you an idea, we had a record rainfall in July last year in winter, and that was nearly close to 2 feet of rain in the month of July. There's as the hop grows through, we have a lot heavier core inside our so that's called the strig inside the cone of the hop, and therefore when you're drying your hops, that's ultimately the part of the cone that you need to dry out. So it takes a little bit longer to dry New Zealand hops because we need to dry that strig out, otherwise it remains too moist. And so when you're in the kilns, there's a huge plume of basically steam as such, but a huge plume of moisture coming off. And when you've got your kiln, will easily lose a foot of height, and that's all just to moisture. And that's one thing I learned, spending many kilns and drying hours over in the States, was the difference in terms of the hop cone structure. And it's all about, as a dryer, you're trying to maintain everything to the very, very last. And as you're maintaining that, that's storing all the goodies in their package to then pass through to the brewer, and then for them to, like I said, reach that spice rack, and they say, okay, well, if I use a bit of Motueka, I'm going to get a bit of zappy zest on the tongue with a bit of lemon and lime and all sorts of things coming through, and then if I mix that with this, then this is what I'm going to get. So and there are seasonal fluctuations, particularly in the New Zealand environment. So that's why when brewers come along and have selections, it's one of my most enjoyable times, because I'm not the best with my nose with how hops smell, and I just love it when I hear the brewers say, oh, this is what I get, and that, I get this, and I was like, wow, okay, yeah, I can see that. Or else I can say, holy crap, you're way off the mark there, buddy, but if that's what you think, you go for it. But and that's the beauty of the way how the hop industry and the beer drinking world has changed so much. You've got these professional chefs out there trying to create a recipe, and that recipe is to produce a beautiful beer for their customers to divulge. Back in the day with hop growing, it was grow the hell out of anything, because if you couldn't, you're going to be on the back burner. You couldn't survive. Now we're actually focusing on those varieties that are creating such a difference that it will be a different experience for the beer drinking public.
Right. That's awesome. Em, do you have any other questions?
I really want to go to New Zealand.
Yeah, I want to try those.
I've never been, and it's
test beers. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just Riwaka here. I live in New England, and it's all about Riwaka. I don't know about you, Don, in Canada, but here where I live in the eastern part of the States, it's most breweries, if they can, come out with 100% Riwaka IPA, and it's all anybody talks about. So it's
it's a hop that is my favorite hop for different reasons, because it's such a like I said, a real finicky young lady to handle. It's always the latest out of the ground to grow. And so you're training it at the very, very end of hop training. But it has a very fast growth pattern if you've got everything going for it. It creates a beautiful hop cone, and the vine, when you do get it growing, it grows very, very nicely. But again, it's related to the weather that you have in that year. And typically we call Riwaka a bit of a fourth or fifth year crop, because by the time it's a variety that has very, very little root reserves, and that's quite strange for a hop. So as you cut it down in the first year, it has a really big hit, and that hit really sucks back into the rootstock, and it just takes a long time to come out of the ground the second year, which is also meaning you don't get enough time on the string for it to wind up, and therefore the lack of time on the string means you're going to get a smaller crop anyway. So it takes about 4 to 5 years to build up a really good consistent root reserve, and in that time you're going to get weaker yields as it comes through. But ultimately, Riwaka has got an X factor that no one has been able to explain yet. Right. If you have a sniff and a rub from it, it's great. Is it exceptional? There's others that are certainly better, but when you put it into beer, it is honestly, it's gold dust. It just, whatever it does, it can bring all the different flavors out of everything. And it's up until about probably 4 years ago, we just simply couldn't get enough growing before it would for it to be exported. So it was very hard for brewers to receive this pot of gold from the end of the rainbow down here in Paradise. It was. And Don, sorry, I know you mentioned before what other varieties have come out of the program. Well, Nectaron was released.
Oh yes,
3 or 4 years ago, and that's really taken the world by storm. A lot of the brewers are really enjoying brewing with it, and the very unique punch that it does give. Quite a lot of pineapple in there, different tropical fruits. It's really done very well. And of course, Nectaron was named after Dr. Ron Beatson, who bred it. So nectar being the nectar of the gods, and the god that is hop breeding is Ron. So it's a good name. And then just the recent release called Superdelic. So it's been when you're naming hop varieties, it's not the easiest thing to do. You've got a marketing team who want to name it this, and you've got growers who want it to name that, and you want the market to be somewhere in the middle. So
and then some trademark lawyer comes along and ruins everything.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. No, you can't use that name. You can't use that. And so we're releasing things with a difference. So Superdelic is our highest oiled hop that we've got in New Zealand at the moment, and it's very, very balanced oils, and it is a phenomenal hop. I have not tasted a beer that has been something I'd tip down the drain. So it's a good sessionable beer, but what it does with all those oils, I explain it to people that it creates like a plate. And when you're out for dinner, you want to put all sorts of flavors on that plate. But if you don't have that plate, you're holding your hand, so you can't get as much flavor on there. And that's exactly like a soil type. When you've got a clay soil type, they explain it as plates. So on that plate, you can fit more nutrients on that plate. In a clay soil, on a sandier silt loam, it tends to disperse off a lot quicker. We find that the plate holds a lot more nutrients or a lot more goodness. So if you put, say, Superdelic into a brew, you can add a lot more hop flavors to it, but those hop flavors, all of a sudden, if you were to add, say, a Riwaka or a Nectaron or a Citra or a Simcoe to it, you'll find flavors that you haven't found out of these varieties before. It's really phenomenal, and it's one hop variety you don't want to over hop, because if you over hop it, will take the shine away from that, and you'll tend more to go with the traditional of the other varieties. So it's a beautiful hop, and it's something we're very proud that we can release out to everyone.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
it sounds amazing. I know. I can't wait to try that.
Yeah. And it sounds sounds like kind of like the salt of hops in terms of enhancing.
I would say the sugar, because I'm a sugar man.
Okay.
I'm a salt. So and we've been quite critical. Many people have been of, you're holding back varieties in New Zealand because it's really good, but no, it takes a while for us to get these varieties out. We're not a big growing nation. We only have a small area. We try and please everyone as best we can, but there will be people we will disappoint, which we're very sorry about. But it takes time, it takes money to change out volumes, and it takes confidence. Once growers have confidence in a variety, then they will jump in boots and all. But it's not until we gain that confidence and we have that confidence in how we're going to grow it as well, then the varieties really take off. And that's where sort of Nectaron is at this stage. Several years after being released, the brewing world has brewed with it. They love it. They want more and more. And therefore it gives the growers confidence to plant up and know that you're going to be able to sell it. So, there's a lot that goes on in the background with the hop world as well too. And these new varieties are fantastic, and we want to make sure everyone can have the opportunity to use them. And sometimes it just takes a bit of time, and it's also good for those brewers, because the brewers who have initially brewed with it, they cut their teeth on it. They learn what is good in this hop and what might not work, what beer style suits best for it. And so, everyone sort of does a bit of learning along the way. And I think the transparency over the last 5 years, particularly in brewing and hop growing around the world, has been brilliant. Then people opening up their gates and doors a lot more, doing collaborative brews, doing collaborative hop growing trials, doing all this sort of stuff. It's fantastic, because the end user is going to benefit from it, and if the end user is benefiting from it, everyone else is as well too.
Right.
For
Awesome.
sure.
So the one last thing I would touch on too, Don, down here, we are a very sustainable hop growing sort of place, particularly our farm. We do our things differently down here. We now have 100% hop compostable twine on our farm.
Cool.
So our whole farm, we used to grow with plastic twine because that's the only thing that we really could get down here, but it was a big problem, and I really wanted to solve that. So we've got a New Zealand company who I've spent 10 years with, and 7 years with, and we've done prototype phase right through to the release, and now we're 100%. We have been this season, and the previous 2 seasons we were ramping up as his production ramped up. So it's really
awesome.
That's a big win for us. The string was one of our last things we wanted to get rid of, because we compost very heavily. Compost to me is the closing of the circle, the closing of the loop in hop growing. And we can bring all those nutrients that we've basically cut the vine off with, and we can return it back out to the field, but you must do it properly. There's a difference in doing compost right, and there's a real problem if you do it wrong. So we spend a significant amount of time on our compost, and it's a real feature to returning back to our fields. And the other thing we use for drying, it's the most energy sapping source to the environment of the hop growing process. So we are on our farm here, we have a wood pellet boiler, and that boils hot water. The hot water doesn't quite take it to boiling. It runs it through a radiator system when we blow our fans onto the radiator. So it's all clean air getting blown onto our hops, and that blows through a radiator, and that's how we dry our hops. Up our new farm, we've taken it a step further, and we've gone to wood chip, and that wood chip works in the same system. But by using these two, the other ways of doing it are either using coal or diesel or the likes of butane. But we can't get a consistent supply of LPG or butane here in New Zealand. So that was out of the question. So some growers have gone to diesel, and other growers have gone to still stuck with coal. But that's pretty much phasing out now, the coal here in New Zealand. But for our farm, for Mac hops in particular, we're possibly one of the world's carbon efficient growers in world hop growing at the moment. So it's quite a proud statement that we can put out there and say.
Yeah. So if I'm drinking New Zealand beer, beer with New Zealand hops, I'm saving the planet.
Yeah,
Sure.
there you go.
I'm doing my part anyways.
That's a great line to end on.
Em, you were going to say something?
No, I just want to go to New Zealand. I'm not adding anything to this conversation. And I'm also just very thirsty for a Riwaka IPA right now.
Yeah. Brent, can you tell us how we can follow you on social media, either yourself or Mac Hops?
Yeah, we've got a Mac Pops NZ Instagram page, and we put a lot of things going on the farm and what's happening with our staff and all sorts of things going on, and we get a great little following there, and it gives people an insight around the world what's happening and what's going on. So if you can tag us into that, and then people can just live their, what's the word, vicariously, live their life vicariously through what we do down here. And look, we are very lucky. We live in a beautiful part of the world. We've got some great people who are part of this industry down here, very, very passionate about what they do and the product they produce. And it is true, when new people come into the industry, you do get hops in your blood, and you just can't get rid of it once it's there. You know, my dad, people say that he's retired. Well, he's not retired. He's done a full hop harvest, and I think he's 73 now, and he will never give it up. And it's a tough thing to leave the body once it's in there. So
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time, Brent.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity, and good luck for your finding your Riwaka IPA, Em. I'm sure you'll sit down, you'll thoroughly enjoy that, and you'll dream of the wonderland that is New Zealand hop growing terroir.
I love that. Yes, I actually think I have one in my fridge right now. So after this interview, I may be going to look for that. So
very good. Well, I won't start being 7:30 now in the morning. I don't think it would be a good sign to rock on down the farm with a beer in my hand.
Probably not.
Awesome. Well, cheers, Brent.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much. So yeah.
We'll continue our show with Ron Beatson of NZ Hops, but first, a word from our sponsors.
Estrella Galicia is an independent, family-owned brewery in northwest Spain, founded in 1906. Estrella Galicia Cerveza Especial is a world-class lager, brewed using the finest Spanish malts, locally cultivated Galician hops, and the best brewing practices, made out of the state-of-the-art facility in A Coruña. Recognized around the world for quality and exceptional character, Estrella Galicia is a beer like no other. To learn more about Estrella Galicia, follow them at Estrella Galicia USA on Instagram.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
Ron Beatson joined NZ Hops Limited, a grower cooperative, as their brand ambassador in June 2022. Prior to this, he was science project leader, hop breeding and genetics, based at the Regional Research Center of the NZ Institute for Plant and Food Research, a government-owned Crown Research Institute, located near Motueka in the heart of the Tasman hop growing region of Aotearoa, New Zealand. During his 40-year career in hops, he has been responsible for the development of 15 cultivars, including well-known cultivars Nelson Sauvin, Motueka, Riwaka, Nectaron, and the latest cultivar released in February 2023, Superdelic. Ron received his Bachelor of Agricultural Science and his Master's of Agricultural Science from Massey University in New Zealand, and his PhD from North Carolina State University in America, where he specialized in plant breeding and genetic studies. Welcome to the show, Ron.
Kia ora from New Zealand. Thanks very much for hosting me.
Yeah, we are very happy to have you here.
Yes, yes, thank you.
You were a researcher with Plant and Food Research. Then how did you become brand ambassador for NZ Hops?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was intending to retire from my job as a research scientist, and where I've been in charge of the hops for about 40 years. And I, at the end of 2021, I thought I'd been able to basically retire gracefully, if you like, and had a good replacement person in place at Plant Food Research. And So I did retire actually for about 5 months, but NZ Hops, the cooperative, came calling and wanted to have some input around some technical aspects of the hops. So I agreed to work part time. So that's how I came to be working for them. Obviously I've got a real passion for hops. Regardless of whom I'm working for, whether it's the plant food research or the cooperative. But it's been developed over many, many years, and so it was quite a smooth transition. In many ways, it's been good for me. I didn't realize at the time quite so much, but I'm promoting a lot of the products which I helped develop under the plant food research umbrella. So the cultivars, in other words, that we developed at Plant Food Research, I ended up promoting them, so that's good. And since I've started, we've released a new one as well. So it's been a good semi-retirement project, one would say.
Nice.
This is I'm going off script here. This is not a question I had pre-planned, but I mean, does it ever happen where somebody says to you, "Oh my God, I hate such and such a hop," and it's one of your hops that you developed?
It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes there's brewers who, you know what brewers are like. Everyone wants to be different. So often they'll comment about which ones they like better. Okay. Most of them are pretty circumspect about telling me that they hate it. But there's one or two brewers who don't like certain cultivars, that's for sure. Some of them can be quite polarizing. For instance, Nelson Sauvin, even though it's very, very popular, some brewers, for whatever reasons, doesn't seem to their taste buds don't like it. So that's fair enough. I accept that. I don't make it easy on them, of course. I keep on asking them when they're going to start using it, and it's quite interesting having the banter with some of these people about why aren't they using more of those hops and things.
Well, send their email. You send them my email address, and I will tell them why they're wrong.
I will also tell them why they're wrong, because I love Nelson is great with something else. That's what I love. Nelson and a different New Zealand hop it's a good backbone to hoppy beer.
Oh yeah, I think so. Personally, I think you're right, and it's, I guess, of all the cultivars that I've been involved with in releasing since the 1980s, it's been that's been the standout one, really. I mean, we've got some really superstars coming along, but that one has been a superstar for 20 years, and it's still going strong, and the growers are still planting it. So it must be something good about it, and it's certainly, obviously, they've been able to sell it at reasonable prices. So, and it's in high demand. So yes, I'd agree with you. And as you say, I think the important thing is it does play well with other cultivars. On its own, it might be, quite polarizing, but certainly when it's been used judiciously with other cultivars, it's really good. It's got some very unique flavors, and I don't. Internationally, I don't think it's been matched in terms of its flavor profile. That white wine flavors that dominate when you use it in the beer.
Yeah,
I love it. It's definitely my favorite. So good. I'm giving you multiple thumbs up right now. Even though you can't.
Oh, good. I'm pleased to hear it.
Yeah, big fan here in America. And in America, it's a huge. New Zealand hops in America are very in demand. It's really, really nice to see. It's always great when I find a New Zealand hop beer that they're just delicious.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's I guess in many ways, as you can appreciate, I go to the United States a little fair bit, and the last time I was there was actually pre-COVID. But one thing I noticed over there was actually quite difficult to find hops with New Zealand hops in them. Actually, sorry, beers with New Zealand hops in them. Mm-hmm. And maybe I was asking in the wrong places, but it seemed like to me that there was certainly interest in it, but yeah, I guess it's just the availability. And but I'm really pleased that you like beers with New Zealand hops in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you've bred some of the most famous and sought after varieties in the world, like single-handedly is the sense I get. So how is it that you are always developing such interesting? What is the secret to your success, I guess?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I just think I'm doing my job. That's all. When I'm as a scientist, that's part of my makeup, I suppose, is that you want to create new things, and that's part of what I do as a job. And so, I guess it's always nice to know that the selections and have come through and become cultivars in their own right. It's hard to put a finger on why we're successful. I think it's partly because it's the genetics we have here in New Zealand. We've followed our own pathway, which I think is probably the most important thing. Our New Zealand cultivars haven't. They've used a different pathway to be created, and in many ways. So we've used heavily the American lake cluster cultivar in our breeding program, historically that is. And, several generations later, we've come up with these new selections. So it's the approach. I'm a classically trained plant breeder, so I've done a lot of what they call population improvement work, trying to select parents that are good for various attributes. And so I guess it's a combination of art and science, I suppose you could call it.
I have to know something. Do you have a favorite of all the ones you've bred? Or is it like children where you won't say?
I guess there are favorites. Actually, one of my favorites has never become a cultivar, and
really,
its sister has become a cultivar, but it's the cultivar Superdelic its sister was one of my favorites, but it never made it for various reasons. The growers and the brewers thought that Superdelic had better attributes, so that's fine. I got over it. It's one thing I've told my successor is when you're out in the field and you're selecting hops, and you have to make your decisions reasonably instantly, and you don't get many second chances with hops, because once the plants are chopped down and taken to the up to be processed and things, that's it. Really, you've got to make a decision then. So don't look back is my motto, really, in plant breeding, because if there's not much good procrastinating about a selection that is no longer there, basically.
Well,
so it's
dare I ask what it was about the sister of Superdelic that you particularly liked?
Oh, I just like the form of the cone, and also I personally thought it had an interesting chemistry profile. For me, it had some nice flavors in beer. When we did some trial brews on it, and so that's the main thing. In New Zealand we don't have any pest and diseases to speak of, so we're very lucky. We don't have to worry about breeding for any kind of mildews or anything like that, because we just don't have them in our climate. And they've never arrived in New Zealand, and which is good. And so we've been able to concentrate on agronomic performance and of the plants, and also probably equally important these days is the flavour and aromas. And in days gone by, it's in the 1980s the alpha was king, and so the higher the alpha, the better the hop was considered. But as times progressed, and particularly with the coming to age of the craft brewing scene and internationally, flavour has become very, very important. So that's now a major component of our breeding program. So that's okay. That's about it, really, on that story. I don't want to go on too long. I know the interview's short.
No, you can go on as long as you want, because I love talking about this sort of stuff.
Don's a real nerd. Because I have to remind people every episode that you're speaking to some nerds here. So if you want to geek out, we welcome it.
I don't want to get too technical about the science side of it. That's all. And but we have used in our program. I say it's a blend of art and science. That's really the hallmark of our program. We've been able to tap into genetic material from North America and also from Europe, And that's the home of hops. We don't have hops growing naturally in New Zealand, so we've had hops growing here for 180 years, but they don't originate from here. So all the material has come from overseas initially, anyway. And what we've done is we created combinations of those. And as you can appreciate, when you go down the generations, it becomes an identity in its own right in terms of the New Zealand story, if you like. And so a lot of our hops have got quite strong flavors in terms of their fruitiness and various types of fruitiness, if you like, and including Nelson Sauvin and Superdelic and Nectaron, for instance. They're all distinctively different, and that's what's good about hop breeding in general, be it in New Zealand or elsewhere. We're coming up with combinations that are new and they blend well together. Some of the best beers I've tasted, in fact, have been beers that have been brewed with both North American and New Zealand cultivars. So, some of those combinations really have a synergistic effect in terms of adding flavors. Right. I think our hops also too have hit the mark in terms of the craft beer boom. Nelson Sauvin was probably at the start of it, and it was released in 2000, and the craft beer boom sort of was about to really take off, and so they wanted new flavors. And likewise, with the introduction of hazy beers recently, the Nectaron and Superdelic are, quite ideally suited to that as well. So they're suited to strong, IPA type beers anyway, sort of strongly hopped beers. I think we've been fortunate that we've been able to develop these cultivars, and that's coincided with various the upswing of various types of beer flavors.
Mm-hmm. How does, like, when you were breeding, do you sit there and go, it'd be really interesting to have a new hop that has, I don't know, kiwi flavors in it, for example, and then you try and figure out how to do that? Or are you thinking more on a are you thinking more chemically? Are you thinking more sensorily? How do you decide what to do and what to try?
Yeah, well, it's actually a combination of both, really, because once you've done your cross there, Don, it takes 2 years basically to grow a seedling from a cross. So the plant sits for 2 years in the field, pretty much, and then we start doing selection work. The initial phase is, of course, that every plant is genetically different. So you go through our population of plants, and we select the chosen ones that are good agronomically. Obviously, agronomics is important for everyone for it to be successful. The growers won't grow it if it's poor yielder, which is pretty obvious, I know. But and then it's a matter of going through the chemistry, because it is hops you can regard really as a chemical factory, really, to me anyway. They are, because they're very high in secondary plant metabolites. Hundreds of compounds have been identified. And so that's the basis of it. Now, getting all the different combinations and lined up is obviously something that we can't really do until we start looking at the flavors as well. So we do testing. We've got a pilot brewing plant at Plant and Food Research, and we do early generation evaluations of beers made with these various selections. So it happens fairly early on now. We used to not do brewing trials until just before they were released to growers, but we found that it's important for us now, especially with flavour being so important in the breeding program, that we do our testing earlier on and get our ducks lined up, so to speak. So yeah, so to answer your question, Don, it's a combination of a lot of things, really. That's what plant breeding is. It's as I said before, it's a combination of art and science, really, in many ways, because you've got to get the combinations right, but also there's got to be some science in there to make sure you do the right crosses and use the right parents. One of the things that we've specialised in here in New Zealand is the developing triploid cultivars, which are plants with 3 sets of chromosomes rather than the normal 2. And the reason is that they are genetically seedless, And to create them, you've actually got to have one parent that's got 4 sets of chromosomes, and you cross it with a parent with 2 sets. So, and when you do that cross of 2 sets by 4 sets, you end up with the hybrid in between has got 3 sets, and you can't divide 3. So hence the reason why they're genetically seedless. So that's been quite an important part of our program. It's not an easy route to producing a new cultivar. It's a lot easier if we just had the normal 2 sets and cross with another one with 2 sets. But for over the years, we've developed this population of these plants with 4 sets of chromosomes. And we call them parents, really. That's what it is. It's tetraploid parents. So these tetraploid parents have become very, very important in our breeding program. And it's really getting down and drilling into those tetraploids. It's been the hallmark of our program. And that's really the secret to our success, I believe, is that we've been able to identify tetraploid plants, which no one else has got them, and we've crossed them with diploids. And so, for instance, Superdelic is a cross between a diploid mother crossed with a tetraploid father, and so that's it's the first one we've done with the tetraploid as the dad, if you like, the father.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, and to get to the tetraploids, you have to identify them, obviously. So we have to do progeny testing. In plant breeding terms, that's basically looking at the analogy is in the animal kingdom is the artificial insemination procedures they use in the dairy industry with super bulls, and you look at the progeny of them, or the females of or daughters of the super bull, and you pick the best one out of there. So that's essentially what we've been doing. We've been picking good tetraploid plants based on the progeny or the female progeny. So it's not a short procedure, but we've now got populations that are quite well developed, and we use them extensively in our breeding program now. So I think that's been the hallmark of our program. Has been the fact that we've got slightly different genetics that we've used in our program, and also the fact that we've got these we've doubled the chromosome numbers of some of the material to make them tetraploids, and these have been the hallmark of our program. They're a cornerstone, really, of our program.
So,
sorry if that was a bit too technical, but
I love this stuff.
I was done. Yeah, I'm like at attention. It's great.
If you could distill down for the benefit of beer drinkers why they should care about a triploid.
Oh, yeah.
What is the benefit?
I can tell that you already know. So yeah, well, so that's something I didn't talk about. Was seedlessness is important in hops. Traditionally, it's been the way to produce. Hops are produced seedless because what they do is they remove in North America in particular, and also in Germany and Czech Republic and other countries, the way they produce seedlessness is to just not have male plants planted anywhere near their commercial gardens.
Right.
In New Zealand, it's not quite so important because we've got triploids, so there are male plants around, and that route was taken mainly because if those people who've been to New Zealand will understand that it's quite a benign climate for growing a lot of crops, and this is a big horticultural area where we grow hops in New Zealand and top end of the South Island, and there's a lot of rivers and there's a lot of wild hops that grow along these, and a lot of these are male plants. So the other important thing, of course, is that you've got the sex of the hop is on separate plants, so male and female on separate plants. So, right. So essentially, and why the seedlessness is important because the studies have shown that they can have these compounds which interact with the malt and the yeasts and form bad compounds in the flavor of beer. So essentially, it's seedlessness is the way to reduce that.
I'm going to ask a question that I know is going to sound ridiculous, but I actually am asking the question seriously. The benefit of the triploid hops is that you don't have to worry about males being around, but might males being around actually be beneficial to the growth of the female vine?
Yes, they can be.
Okay.
They can stimulate the development of the seed, well, the seed process, if you like, in the female inflorescence. Yeah. So they can stimulate the formation of the cone, as it's called.
Interesting.
So, it's not essential, and but there's some thought that it will boost yields. The only thing about it is that it can change the ratio of the overall internal structure of the cone, and maybe less going into the bracteole type development, and rather into the other parts of the hop cone. So I guess what I'm saying is that it can be beneficial, but it also can reduce things like alpha acids and things like that if you have too much of the male plants around. They do. When I say seedlessness, they're not 100% seedless. They will have 1 or 2% will actually set seed, and so they'll in a cone, in other words, will be a couple of seeds that possibly fertile, and that can just add to the weight of the cone, and be not quite so good.
Oh, I
so so the idea is that yes, certainly the having male plants around will change the amount of material that's coming off the plant, but it's not necessarily a good thing. So most growers here, for instance, don't bother planting males anymore, and most they'll have male plants around the district, but it's not a practice which we is in favour.
You've revealed your secret now, the tetraploid and the triploid chromosomes. So now everybody knows. The Germans know, the Americans know. But
to be fair, I mean the process is quite common in plant breeding.
Oh, is that? Okay.
And there have been cultivars released in America, and also in I don't know whether the Germans have released any, but certainly the Slovenians have released triploids.
Oh,
and there's been the odd one released from Australia as well. So, and for instance, Liberty and I was just trying to think, Mount Hood are both triploid cultivars from the States. So, and they, so they are around, and it's not, it's not a secret. I don't think people just don't want to do it that way because it's actually quite a long-winded procedure to produce a triploid. So that's probably the reason for it, and they got no reason to do it. So anyway,
so let's say there are breeders who love the flavor of your New Zealand hops, but because you're breeding, you're not concerned about breeding for disease resistance. Can they use New Zealand cultivars to breed with American hops with an eye to growing them in America or Germany or the UK or wherever?
Yeah, they could do, but the material is not available. It's our genetic material is held in New Zealand. We don't release any of that material offshore.
Oh.
That plant, proprietary cultivars in their own right. So much the same as what's happening in, with the advent of private breeding programs around the world, they've become a lot more protective of their genetic material, which is understandable because that's their bread and butter. So they wouldn't bear in mind that when you're breeding these cultivars, they every time you do a cross, it's going to produce different. It's going to be a lolly scramble, if you like, with the progeny that it produces. So it's not going to be if they used New Zealand cultivars, they're not going to be that successful in terms of replicating the New Zealand cultivars in progeny that have been derived from that. So, I guess the short answer is it's probably not something that breeders tend to follow. The other thing about it, I think you mentioned, Don, is that disease resistance. Our cultivars are not going to be that successful offshore because they are not haven't been bred for powdery mildew or downy mildew. So there's that aspect about it as well. And if you look around the world, most hop growing countries, well, in fact, all the ones that I can think of, have their own breeding programs, because hops are actually quite latitude sensitive as well. So that's another factor into it as well. That they perform very well in their own environment, but not necessarily flowering and behaving well if they're put into another environment with different latitudes. For instance, in New Zealand here, we're at 41, 42 south of the equator, and that's equivalent of about New York City and Northern California in terms of latitude, and also around Rome and right through Madrid and around that area in Europe. So we're quite a way south of where most of the production is in the Northern Hemisphere.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask, there was this, for a time, everybody wanted alpha acids, and then now everybody wants oils. And now thiols and thiol precursors are the thing. Like, how much, when you're breeding, are you trying to anticipate changes, or are you, because it takes a long time to develop a new cultivar. So how much are you reacting to, consumer trends and brewer trends?
Well, I've got a special crystal ball here.
Yeah.
I know. I was going, can you see into the future? That was my next question.
Yeah, that's rather funny because they actually made some gifts here with a hop in the middle of a ball of resin, like a crystal ball, and so often hold this up when I'm giving that talk. No, I don't. I'm aware of changes, and I think you just got to have an open mind when you're doing your breeding. You cross for what you think is going to be the next trend, if you like. Often it's it's you've got to have growers in mind as well. As and having in New Zealand, for instance, we've got a lot of emphasis now on having a harvest window variation in our selections. In other words, we have early, medium, and late ones. The harvest is just finished last week, and we start harvesting in late February. So it's about a 5-week window, I guess you could call it. So that's one thing that we've always keep in mind. And so I think when we're doing our selection work, we keep the chemistry in mind. Obviously, as I said, that's probably the hallmark of the hops is what their chemistry profile is. But often the compounds you can't measure very easily. I mean, like the thiols you mentioned, Don. It's thiols are something that's of great interest, and it's a nice word to slip off the tongue, but I don't think anybody really understands the full significance of thiols themselves. There's been a lot of research, I know, done in Belgium and other places, and the US now too as well, looking at thiols. But we haven't got the capability here ourselves to do work in thiols, so our only pathway to doing any kind of selection work like that is to look at the sensory side of things. So we put it into beer, do a brew, and then come up with what we think are the flavors of these things. Right. So when in our pilot brewing plant, for instance, what we try to do is brew beers that are pretty standard. There's nothing sort of super flash about our beers. They're just sort of strong pale ales. But what we try to do is we add a bittering hop during the kettle stage, and then we use the new selections, if you like, in the dry hopping procedures of each. So we test about 18 to 20 every week of these hop selections, and so we put them into beer basically, and then do the full-on test with them from there. So, and we do, it's all electronically recorded on our phones and things, so we can upload them and get results pretty much instantly of what selections stand out. So,
Great. Awesome.
I don't know whether it's probably not answering your question fully, but
no,
it's
it does absolutely. Last question for you, Ron. We, Em and I, as we were preparing for the show, we learned that a relatively new hop variety was actually named after you, which is Nectaron.
Mhm.
And so wondering what that's like, having
what's
a
that
hop.
like?
You have T-shirts made where you say, "I am
Yeah.
the Ron of Nectaron,"
Is it
or
on your business
No.
card or?
Funny enough, I haven't even got a business card yet, so
Oh,
it's I've
okay.
slipped
Well,
up
maybe
there.
should be
I've
on
got
your business card, maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So I've when they first suggest, I didn't name it, by the way, but it was I was a little bit embarrassed about it actually, including my part of my name on it. But it has taken off, and I realise now that it's quite unique, and it's just a made up name, as you can appreciate, and it's Nectar of the Gods and Ron Beatson sort of. So that's I'm quite honoured that they called a hop after me, and but I don't wear it around on my t-shirt. No,
no? Okay.
There are t-shirts with Nectaron on it though, but I don't wear it to the pub on a Saturday night or anything like that. So,
Awesome,
but
Ron. Thank you for your time.
Yes,
How can
thank you.
people, how can people follow you and what you're up to on social media or whatnot?
yeah, well, it's been a pleasure, and I hope I've told a coherent story about the hop industry here. It's a great industry here, and I'm very proud of what Plant and Food and myself have contributed to the success of the industry. It's really without the cultivars, it would be just another item, commodity crop. But I think we've got some interesting material coming through. We've got some wonderful ways of producing. I think we've got a program called BRAC Brewing Program here, and it's the pathway to market really of advanced selections developed by Plant and Food Research in the joint program with NZ Hops. And it's the way of getting them out to brewers and getting good feedback. So it's pretty unique, really. And we've got brewers in the United States and Australia and New Zealand involved in this procedure, and we're getting good feedback. And it's in its second year now of rollout, and I think you'll just watch the space. There's going to be some new cultivars coming out of this program pretty
You're
soon.
not done yet.
Oh, exciting.
Yes, awesome. Well, thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ron.
No problems at all, and happy to talk again anytime.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, bye-bye.
So, Em, how do you think that went? What did you learn?
So, oh my God, I learned so much. As I always say, it's really fascinating. I like talking about the sheep usage. Actually, I thought that was
Yes.
really fascinating. It was really great to let Ron just be Ron and like get really like technical with it.
Triploids and
I triploid,
tetraploids.
yeah, like that was just, I was just sitting here listening, being like, I want to take a class from this man. I
Yeah.
want to, like, he's so important to like world craft brewing. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if
And
he,
so
I mean,
humble about it too.
and just a real sweet guy too. That was really, it was really great to listen to him talk, listen to Brent, and like learning how to farm. And it was
Yeah.
this was a really great episode.
I think that obviously we are beer lovers and we love the flavor that hops provide. But they're real people who grow, they have to grow these things, and
Yeah.
it's not as simple as just putting it in the ground. And breeding these things, you don't just put a male and a female next to each other and put some Berry White on, and then voila, you have Nelson Sauvin. This is really hard.
Yeah, it was awesome. So cool.
Oh, okay. Visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/allaboutbeer, to support this show and others. If you have questions for the experts, please email us at podcast@allaboutbeer.com. That's also the email for feedback, suggestions, or to inquire about supporting this show through advertising. Speaking of advertising, here's a short word from our sponsors.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
Estrella Galicia is an independent family-owned brewery in northwest Spain, founded in 1906. Estrella Galicia Cerveza Especial is a world-class lager brewed using the finest Spanish malts, locally cultivated Galician hops, and the best brewing practices made out of the state-of-the-art facility in A Coruña. Recognized around the world for quality and exceptional character, Estrella Galicia is a beer like no other. To learn more about Estrella Galicia, follow them at Estrella Galicia USA on Instagram.
Before we go, if you like this podcast, one easy thing you can do to help us is to give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. That helps other people find the show. We'd also appreciate it if you would let your beer-loving friends know about the show to help us spread the gospel of good beer. Em, how can people reach out to you?
I am at Pints and Panels across all social media, and my website is www.pintsandpanels.com. How about you, Don?
I am at The Dawn of Beer on Twitter and Instagram, and people can drop me an email at don@thedawnofbeer.com. This show is produced by All About Beer. Visit allaboutbeer.com for articles, notes on this show and others, and to connect via the newsletter and social media. Cheers!
Cheers!